Welcome back to the Deep Dive Learner. I want you to think about the exact moment you opened your social media feed this morning.
Right, just that split second.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like in the 1.5 seconds it took your screen to load,
Yeah.
there was this silent, invisible AI that made 5 billion probabilistic calculations.
Which is just a staggering number to even try and visualize.
It really is. And it wasn't just predicting what you want to see. It was predicting the next 19 actions you're going to take. It basically mapped your entire digital identity, checked your invisible credibility score, and arranged a timeline specifically designed to keep you scrolling.
So today we're taking you straight inside the black box of that exact system.
We are. Because we're looking at what happens when the very architecture of human connection gets completely rewired.
Yeah, we're moving from this internet built on rigid human rules to an internet driven entirely by machine intuition. And, well, the growing pains are honestly pretty staggering.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So the source material we're cracking open today is this massive, highly detailed manifesto. It was published in April 2026 by the veteran tech analyst Robert Scoble.
Right.
And it's called How to Fix X.
Yeah.
It's essentially this exhaustive autopsy of the highly secretive Phoenix algorithm update, the one that recently transformed X, formerly Twitter, obviously, from the ground up.
And the fascinating thing is Scoble didn't just sit in a room and guess about what happened.
Oh, he really didn't.
Right, he actually deployed an AI agent to analyze over 40,000 accounts across his curated lists. So he synthesized the community's reaction, their collapsing reach, and their very specific demands.
Which is wild, because that turns this document into this profound sociological case study.
Exactly. I mean, by analyzing those 40,000 data points, Scoble captured the real friction between raw technological capability and actual human behavior.
Yeah, this isn't just about one app's update, you know. It's a masterclass in how algorithmic infrastructure dictates the flow of global information, how it shifts economic power among creators, and ultimately attempts to build a foundation for what Scoble aggressively calls a civilization operating system.
Right, which is a phrase we are definitely going to unpack later.
Oh, for sure. But I want to start at the absolute foundation first, like the engine room. Because in January 2026, X's head of product, Nikita Beer, basically oversaw a complete replacement of the core algorithm.
They literally tossed out the old engine and just dropped in Phoenix.
Right. But to really get why Phoenix is so disruptive, we got to understand what it actually replaced. The source material mentions the old system was a 48 million parameter neural network based on quote-unquote hand-engineered features. So, what does that actually look like under the hood?
Well, okay, think of a parameter as a single physical knob on a massive complex mixing board.
Okay, like an audio board at a concert.
Exactly like that. So the old system had 48 million of these tiny little knobs. But the crucial part is human engineers were the ones who decided what those knobs controlled.
Right, the hand-engineered part.
Right, those are the heuristics.
Yeah.
A human programmer literally sat down at a desk and coded the logic. They said, okay, if a post gets a retweet, turn the reach knob up 10%. If a user follows a dozen different sports accounts, flip the switch that puts them firmly in the sports fan bucket.
So it was essentially this giant, incredibly convoluted flowchart of human logic.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Like, it was a million human traffic cops manually directing cars at every single intersection. And if traffic backs up, the human cop blows a whistle and says, okay, let more cars turn left now.
That captures the manual nature of it perfectly. I mean, it was this patchwork system built over a decade full of legacy code and human assumptions about what actually makes content good.
Which is so messy.
It is, but because it was based on human logic, it was legible. You know, you could reverse engineer it.
Oh, like if you were a marketer or something.
Exactly. If you were a marketer or a creator, you could figure out the exact sequence of actions needed to game the system. But then in January 2026, they fired all the traffic cops.
They just threw the 48 million knob mixing boards straight into the incinerator?
Completely. And they replaced it with Phoenix, which the report describes as a single Grok-based transformer model.
Okay, so instead of a million human cops, they basically dropped an omniscient AI traffic god into the intersection that just sort of senses where you want to go.
Yeah, it fundamentally shifted the paradigm from heuristic learning to pattern learning. A transformer model doesn't care about our human rules. It uses something called an attention mechanism.
Okay.
So it looks at massive amounts of completely unstructured data and figures out the relationships on its own.
So it's not looking at a rule book anymore.
No, not at all. Phoenix isn't checking to see if a retweet is mathematically worth more than a like. It is analyzing those 5 billion ranking decisions every single day, completing each calculation in under 1.5 seconds. Yeah, just to find behavioral patterns that human engineers couldn't even conceptualize.
I mean, 5 billion decisions a day is a scale that almost breaks the brain. But the detail in the report that really just stopped me dead was what it's actually calculating during those 1.5 seconds.
Right, the 19 actions.
Yeah. It's not just predicting if you're going to click like. It is predicting 19 simultaneous actions for every single post.
And this is exactly where we cross from basic algorithmic sorting into deep behavioral modeling.
It's spooky, honestly.
Well, the system is calculating a highly complex probability tree.
Let's map that out, because I really want to dig into this. If it's predicting 19 actions, it must be looking at like tiny micro behaviors, right?
Absolutely micro behaviors. It's predicting things like, will this user linger on this specific video for 3 seconds?
Just 3 seconds.
Right. Or will they click the profile picture? Will they expand the bio to read it? Will they highlight a specific string of text to copy it to their clipboard? Will they open the reply box, type out a heated response, delete the whole thing, and then just close the app entirely?
Oh man, I do that all the time.
We all do. And the system evaluates that entire sequence of physical actions before you even see the post on your screen.
Before it even loads.
Exactly. And based on that specific probability tree, it decides whether to serve you the content. It completely bypasses human logic.
So if I stare at a video of a cat for 3 seconds, the AI doesn't know why I like the cat, right?
Right. The AI doesn't know what a cat is or why it brings you joy. It only knows that the mathematical pattern strongly suggests you will linger on that cluster of pixels and then maybe click the bio.
Okay, so if the AI is predicting 19 different physical actions, we really have to look at how it actually understands our identity now. Because Scoble's report outlines 5 specific technical pillars of Phoenix.
Yes, the 5 pillars are crucial to understanding this new era.
And the first one completely redefines user categorization. It's called dynamic embeddings.
Right. And to really understand dynamic embeddings, we sort of have to unlearn how the internet traditionally categorized us.
Which is the buckets, right?
Exactly. In the old heuristic system, you were put into solid, rigid containers. The algorithm said, okay, this user likes technology and they like baking. You were placed in those 2 buckets, and you were fed content from those buckets.
Like dropping an ice cube into an ice tray.
Yeah.
You're just defined by the walls of the little compartment you're placed in.
That's a perfect way to visualize it. But the report says, under Phoenix, our interests are living vectors that update in real time.
Okay, so explain the mechanics of a living vector, but, without making it sound like a college math textbook.
Fair enough. So instead of a solid ice cube, think of your digital identity like a single drop of food coloring in a massive clear glass of water.
Okay, I'm with you.
You are entirely fluid. Let's say your baseline color when you open the app is a light blue. Now you pause for 2 extra seconds on a highly technical thread about artificial intelligence.
Which it predicted I would do.
Right. And instantly your color shifts to a slightly darker blue. Then you tap on a localized news story about, say, a mayoral race in Chicago.
Oh.
The moment you tap that your color shifts again, it becomes slightly purple.
And crucially, right, every single piece of content on the entire platform is also actively shifting its color based on who is interacting with it.
Precisely. It's a two-way street. The system isn't looking for predefined text labels like tech or politics anymore. Phoenix is just constantly scanning that giant glass of water to find content that matches your exact, highly specific shade of purple in that precise millisecond.
That is just deeply fascinating.
It is.
But also slightly terrifying, if I'm being honest. Like, your identity is just morphing constantly with every single micro interaction.
Yeah.
But if we're constantly shifting to find our perfect content, match what happens when we are the ones posting.
Ah, well, that brings us to the second pillar, and this is the one the community is absolutely furious about.
Well, the tweet cred score.
Yeah, tweet cred. This represents the invisible friction of the entire news system. Tweet cred is a hidden credibility score ranging from 0 to 100 that is assigned to every single user on the platform.
And it basically acts as the ultimate gatekeeper.
Well, exactly. Your dynamic embedding your color might perfectly match an audience that would love your post. But if your tweet cred score falls below a certain internal threshold, your content is structurally suppressed.
You're just blocked.
Yes, you are blocked from entering the wider distribution belt. It doesn't matter how good the post is.
And the real friction comes from the opacity of it all. Scoble's analysis of those 40,000 accounts shows just immense frustration because creators don't know their score, and they certainly don't know the math behind it.
Right, it's a completely shadow system.
You could be spending literally hours crafting this heavily researched thread, and the algorithm quietly decides, well, your invisible score is a 42, so you're functionally invisible to the network today.
Which naturally forces creators into this awful state of algorithmic superstition.
Well, absolutely. People start doing weird stuff.
They really do. When you don't know the rules, you just start guessing. You see creators assuming they are shadow banned, so they change their posting habits wildly. Or they try to reverse engineer an AI that is mathematically fundamentally impossible for a human to reverse engineer.
Right, because it's pattern learning, not rule learning. But the thing they are bumping up against the hardest is the third technical pillar. And Scoble actually identifies this as the most consequential shift of the whole update, the external link penalty.
Yes. And to really contextualize why this penalty is such a big deal, we have to look at the economic foundations of the web itself.
Okay.
Historically, social media acted as a router. It surfaced interesting things, and you clicked a link to go read them on the creator's actual website.
Right, like, oh, here's a cool article, click the link, read it on their blog.
Exactly. But under the Phoenix architecture, if you place a hyperlink in the main body of your post that directs a user off the X platform, your distribution is aggressively penalized.
Like, severely penalized.
For non-premium accounts, it effectively zeroes out your reach completely.
And the logic there is brutally straightforward. Like, if you click a link, you leave X. You leave the environment where they can serve you advertisements. The system just views an external link as a leak in the hull of the ship.
That's exactly it. It is a blunt force optimization for maximum time on platform. The algorithm only wants native text, native video, native audio. It actively suppresses any user who tries to act as a bridge to the outside internet.
We're definitely going to come back to the massive philosophical fallout of that in a minute because it's huge.
Yeah.
But let's finish the technical breakdown first. Because the fourth pillar dictates the temporal physics of this system, the engagement velocity window.
Right. So the time frame for a post to be successful has been compressed dramatically. The data Scoble pulled shows that the first 30 to 60 minutes after a post goes live dictate approximately 80% of its total lifetime reach.
80%.
Yes. Phoenix is measuring the initial velocity. How fast and how intensely does that early core audience react?
Okay, so if it doesn't trigger an immediate, like, statistically significant reaction, the AI just categorizes it as low interest and immediately stops showing it.
It kills it in the crib, basically.
Which is wild because if 80% of your reach is decided in the first hour, that fundamentally changes what kind of content even gets made.
It absolutely does.
Like, if I write this nuanced 4,000-word analysis of, say, global supply chains, it might take my followers 20 solid minutes just to read the thing.
Right.
By the time they finish it and think, oh, this is great, I'll click, like, the 30-minute velocity window is already closing.
Exactly. The algorithm assumes the post is dead because the engagement wasn't instantaneous.
So it builds this enormous systemic incentive for reflexive content.
It rewards a visceral reaction over a considered one.
Yeah.
You have to make the user laugh or, honestly, more effectively make them angry in the first 3 seconds just to generate the immediate interaction that fuels that velocity engine.
Which leads directly right into the fifth and final pillar, reply weight. Scoble's data indicates that the algorithm now places this astronomical value on conversation.
The multiplier is staggering here.
Specifically, one reply, especially if the original author engages back with that reply, is mathematically equivalent to about 150 standard likes.
A 150 to 1 ratio, which shows that the architecture isn't just trying to keep users on the app, it's trying to trap them in a conversational loop.
Right. You can't just drop a link and leave.
It actively penalizes passive broadcasting. You cannot simply publish a brilliant thought and walk away to live your life. The algorithm demands that you stay in the replies, stoking the fire, acting as a host just to keep the engagement metric ticking upward.
Okay, so Nikita Beer and the engineering team, they dropped this system into the wild. We've got this omniscient AI mapping our living vectors, heavily penalizing outside links, demanding instant viral velocity, and forcing creators to host endless comment section parties. What actually happens when the reality of human sociology crashes into this shiny new mathematical architecture?
Well, it triggered a massive polarization. And it perfectly splits along user-type lines.
Yeah, Scoble's AI synthesized the feedback, and the division between pure consumers and original creators was just remarkably stark.
It really was. For the pure consumer, the person who just opens the app to be informed or entertained while waiting in line, Phoenix is largely viewed as a total masterpiece.
Scoble himself admits this. He notes that for consumers, the For You feed has practically zero noise now. And a huge part of that success comes from a very specific feature Beer introduced, which is custom timelines.
Custom timelines represent, honestly, the best utilization of the Grok AI integration so far.
How did it work before versus now?
Well, previously, if you wanted to follow a specific niche topic, say space exploration, you had to manually find and follow hundreds of individual astronauts and rocket
And
scientists.
just pray they didn't post about their breakfast that morning.
Exactly. But now you simply type space exploration and Grok instantly generates a dedicated hyper-curated timeline. It pulls the absolute best content from across the entire network, regardless of whether you followed the authors or not.
It turns this chaotic, overwhelming fire hose into a highly polished, personalized magazine.
It really does. And the consumers are also thrilled because the feedback loop finally works instantly.
Right, because of those dynamic embeddings we talked about, the shifting food coloring analogy.
Yes. If a user taps the I don't like this button on a post high grit, the algorithm instantly updates their vector. That unwanted content just evaporates on the very next refresh.
Which restores a feeling of agency for the user. Like they actually feel like they are steering the machine rather than the machine just dragging them along by the collar.
Exactly. But, and this is a massive but, if the consumers are steering a pristine luxury vehicle, the creators are the ones getting repeatedly run over by it.
Oh, absolutely flattened. Across the board, original content creators reported a catastrophic collapse in their metrics. Scoble cites very specific creator data showing impressions dropping by 42%, overall engagements plummeting by 44%, and profile visits slashed by over 50%.
Because the architecture actively starves them.
It does.
Because of that 30-minute velocity window, high-effort original content is just being suffocated. Meanwhile, low-effort AI slop goes incredibly viral.
Right, because the algorithm cannot distinguish between genuine human insight and an AI-generated reaction image of a shocked cat.
It only measures the velocity of the click. So
Yeah.
automated accounts that are just spamming sensationalist imagery easily outcompete real researchers who spend weeks writing a single post.
And then there's this really bizarre technical glitch, or what was an intentional feature, that actually fragmented the whole network, the geographic lock-in.
Yes, this was heavily documented by the community. Despite very public promises from leadership to maintain a global reach, creators found that the Phoenix algorithm began siloing content based on localized IP addresses.
So to put that in perspective, if you are a prominent digital artist living in Brazil, right,
Right.
and half your audience has historically been in Japan and the US,
Yeah.
those international followers suddenly just stop seeing your art in their feeds.
Because the AI decided, well, this user is physically located in Brazil, so we will optimize their vector primarily against other Brazilian IP addresses.
Which is crazy. It artificially localized a network that was built entirely on the premise of being borderless.
It completely breaks the fundamental promise of the internet.
It really does. But all of these frustrations, the AI slot, the geo-locking, the velocity window, they're actually secondary symptoms, because Scoble's report identifies a much deeper existential crisis at the heart of the platform.
Yes, the external link penalty isn't just a technical rule. It is the front line of a massive philosophical war.
The war between the town square and the creator platform.
This right here is the absolute crux of Scoble's diagnosis. X is currently trying to execute two mutually exclusive business models simultaneously.
Let's examine the first one, the town square.
Right. So this is the legacy identity of the platform. It is the place where global news breaks, where journalists source real-time information, where dissidents broadcast during political crises.
And the lifeblood of a town square is obviously the external link.
It has to be. It requires the ability to share a deeply reported investigation from an outside publisher and have it disseminate to millions of people instantly.
But then you have the second model, which is the creator platform. And this is where the modern tech economy is heavily pivoting right now.
The goal there is to build an ecosystem where high-profile creators build massive native audiences and earn their living directly from the platform's revenue sharing.
But to make a creator platform lucrative, you absolutely must implement a walled garden.
You have to. You need users to stay inside the app to consume ads. You literally cannot afford to let them click a link that takes them to the New York Times or to Substack.
So Phoenix was essentially forced to make a choice. And the algorithm ruthlessly optimized for the walled garden.
It instituted the link penalty to trap user attention, but by doing so, it is systematically asphyxiating the town square.
Scoble actually provides a data point from the community that illustrates this perfectly.
Mm.
And just to be clear, we are looking at this strictly as an economic and algorithmic case study, right? Not an editorial judgment on the content.
Of course, purely algorithmic data.
Right. So he notes that the Phoenix algorithm, because of that massive link penalty, structurally suppresses major journalistic institutions like the New York Times, while simultaneously hyper-elevating accounts that post emotive native content, the specific example cited in the source being the account Cattered.
And the crucial thing to understand here is the algorithm isn't making a political choice.
No, not at all.
It is making a retention choice. The Times sends you away to their website. The native creator keeps you scrolling on the app.
It's purely math.
Pure math. And Scoble argues this is a fatal strategic error.
Why? I mean, if it keeps people on the app, isn't that good for business?
Well, marginally, yes. Suppressing external links might marginally increase the time on app metric for the current financial quarter, but it destroys the platform's unique value proposition over the long term.
Nice.
If researchers, journalists, and global experts realize their life's work is being algorithmically buried in favor of engagement bait, they will simply abandon the network.
Right, they'll just go somewhere else.
And a walled garden that cuts itself off from the flow of outside information eventually just turns into a stagnant pond.
Which brings us perfectly to the pivot point of the whole manifesto. Scoble doesn't just outline the collapse of the town square and complain about it.
Yeah.
He actually provides a highly specific, multi-tiered blueprint to resurrect it.
He argues the overarching vision of AI curation is correct, but the economic and algorithmic parameters need an immediate, violent course correction.
So he lays out 10 immediate fixes, which we can group into 3 strategic clusters. Let's start with the first cluster, which is fixing reach and distribution.
His very first demand strikes directly at the heart of the conflict we just discussed. Fix the external link penalty.
Right. Scoble insists that X must restore distribution for posts containing links to at least 70% of the reach of native content.
He readily concedes this will absolutely result in users clicking away.
Yeah, he's not blind to the business side.
But he argues that the cultural relevance of being the definitive global news aggregator is vastly more valuable than hoarding an extra 3 minutes of user attention.
And if we follow that logic, it explains the next major shift he demands. Because his second fix targets the most fundamental betrayal of the social media contract, in my opinion, separating discovery reach from creator reach.
This addresses a profound frustration for creators. Historically, the mechanism of following someone was a direct, explicit command to the platform.
Right. It meant I want to see what this specific person says.
Exactly. But Phoenix blurred those lines. It applied the exact same predictive algorithm to the content of people you explicitly follow as it did to complete strangers.
So creators are looking at their dashboards and realizing, wait, I have 50,000 opted-in followers, but my posts are only being served to 400 people.
Because Phoenix is overriding the user's explicit choice with its own probability tree.
Right. The AI is deciding, yes, you followed this person 3 years ago, but my vector math says you don't actually want to see this specific post from them today, so I'm going to hide it.
And Scoble demands a hard separation here. The algorithm should absolutely dictate the For You discovery feed. That's fine. But if a user clicks follow, the creator must have guaranteed reach to that user's chronological feed.
He even suggests maybe gating that guaranteed reach as a premium subscription perk, which is an interesting business model.
It is, but fundamentally it restores the concept of audience ownership. You actually own the audience you built.
Okay, so to complete the distribution fixes, he demands an immediate override of the IP-based geolocation lock-in. Just return the platform to a default global state.
Yes.
And he also advocates for a true, unmanipulated chronological feed for the 5 to 10% of power users who rely on real-time chronological data.
Yeah.
For financial trading or fast-breaking news gathering.
Right, the people who need raw, unfiltered speed. So that handles the basic mechanics of distribution. The second cluster of his fixes focuses on quality and trust.
And this is where Scoble tries to literally rewire the psychology of the algorithm. He says Phoenix has to stop obsessing over that 30-minute velocity window and start rewarding what he calls slow burn quality signals.
Because he is asking the algorithm to differentiate between a simple reflex and a genuine intention.
Right. What's the difference there mechanically?
Well, a like is completely frictionless. It requires zero cognitive load. You just double tap and keep scrolling.
Yeah, I do it without even thinking half the time.
But utilizing the bookmark feature or the save function, or actually spending 5 uninterrupted minutes reading a dense multi-part thread, those physical actions require significant cognitive intent.
They actually signal high density value.
Exactly. But under the current rules, if I write a brilliant 20-page thesis on, say, semiconductor manufacturing, it won't get 1,000 likes in the first 10 minutes simply because people are too busy actually reading it.
Right. It takes 20 minutes to read.
So Phoenix kills it at minute 10 because the velocity is too low.
Which is just a tragic flaw in the design. So Scoble argues that if a post receives a high ratio of bookmarks or deep read time, the algorithm must artificially extend its lifespan far beyond that initial velocity window.
You have to reward the slow burn to kill the economic incentive for rage bait. There is actually a quote synthesized from the community feedback in his report that perfectly distills this idea.
What was it?
Rage bait extracts from the graph value-driven social compounds inside it.
Wow, that's incredibly sharp. Rage bait extracts value-driven social compounds. Because outrage generates a really quick spike in metrics, right? But it ultimately exhausts the user base. They log off feeling angry.
Right, whereas deep knowledge builds compounding archival value for the entire network. People come back because they learned something.
Now, here is a fix. Scoble proposes in this trust cluster that I honestly think requires some really serious scrutiny. He demands absolute transparency regarding the Tweep Cred score.
Right, the hidden credibility score.
Yeah, he wants the entire criteria totally open source so creators understand exactly why they're being shadow banned, exactly how to recover their score.
Well, from a creator's perspective, running a business without actually knowing the rules of compliance is completely untenable. But you see a structural risk here.
A massive one. I mean, if you publish the exact mathematical weights for how credibility is scored, aren't you literally just handing a step-by-step instruction manual to the most sophisticated, state-sponsored bot farms and bad actors on the planet?
It is the classic cybersecurity debate, right? Security through obscurity versus open source resilience.
It's the equivalent of a major bank publishing the literal architectural blueprints of its vault and the daily sleep schedule of its security guards, just in the name of transparency.
You are absolutely correct that bad actors will immediately weaponize that transparency. However, you have to look at the collateral damage of the obscure approach we have right now.
The collateral damage.
Yes. Legitimate small businesses, independent journalists, artists, they are losing 50% of their livelihood literally overnight because a transformer model adjusted an invisible parameter.
And there's no one to call.
Right. There is no human customer service representative to appeal to. You just lose your income.
It's entirely Kafkaesque. Like, you are guilty, but the state refuses to tell you what the actual law is.
Precisely. And honestly, Scoble isn't suggesting they open source the underlying neural weights of the AI itself. He is just advocating for clear, actionable guidelines.
Okay, so more like guardrails.
Right. The platform must explicitly state things like, if you post more than 50 times in a 24-hour period, your credibility score drops. Or if verified premium human accounts bookmark your content, your credibility score rises.
I see. Providing a basic map allows good actors to consciously align their behavior with the health of the network. That makes the tension manageable, I guess. You provide the rules of the road without handing over the literal keys to the engine.
Exactly. And speaking of bad actors, his final fix in this trust cluster addresses the AI slop epidemic.
Oh, the AI slop is just everywhere right now.
The community is completely overwhelmed by automated accounts. They utilize basic language models to instantly generate these generic inflammatory replies to viral posts purely to farm engagement revenue.
So what's the fix?
Scoble proposes a dual-pronged approach. First, introducing a verified human identity badge that carries immense algorithmic priority over unverified accounts.
Okay.
And second, implementing devastating reach penalties for any accounts posting at superhuman frequencies.
It perfectly encapsulates the irony of the modern internet, doesn't it? Like, we have to deploy Grok, this highly advanced, incredibly expensive AI, to relentlessly hunt and suppress the garbage generated by thousands of cheaper, lesser AIs.
It is a literal algorithmic arms race, which leads right into his final cluster of immediate fixes, empowering the user and the economy.
Right. He wants to double down on what already works. Custom timelines are a huge hit. So he says just open the floodgates, allow users to build unlimited custom timelines.
And, more importantly, allow them to share and monetize those timelines in a public marketplace.
Which is brilliant. If I spend hours curating the absolute ultimate timeline for, say, biotechnology news, let me offer it to the rest of the network for a small fee.
It creates a whole new class of curator creators. He also insists X must formalize its absolute dominance in the AI sector by creating a dedicated AI news vertical.
Right, because capturing the fact that all the founders and researchers building these AI models are already actively debating on X in real time makes perfect sense. They're already there.
Exactly. But the real linchpin of user empowerment is fixing the underlying platform economics. The creator economy on X is currently severely underfunded.
Yeah, while Moquita Beer introduced revenue sharing, the actual payouts are basically mathematically insignificant compared to their competitors.
Scoble draws a very direct comparison to YouTube here. YouTube pays a high enough percentage that creators can build entire multi-million-dollar production studios and hire massive staffs solely based on ad revenue.
Whereas X pays, pennies on the dollar. And Scoble argues that if you don't offer YouTube-level payouts and implement direct tipping mechanics, you trigger a massive brain drain.
It's inevitable. High-effort creators will always take their premium content to platforms that pay a living wage, leaving X with absolutely nothing but cheap recycled aggregation.
Right. It's a fundamental law of platform economics. The quality of your inventory is directly proportional to your revenue share.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that is the blueprint for mere survival. Fix the external links, guarantee chronological reach to your followers, open source the credibility rules, and, pay the creators enough to actually survive.
But as massive as those changes are, Scoble views them merely as bug fixes.
Right, just the baseline.
The report doesn't end there at all. Using his AI analysis of those 40,000 accounts, he maps out exactly what X should build next after it fixes the foundation.
He lays out this massive 25-step product roadmap. It's escalated across 3 distinct tiers designed to evolve X from just a social media app into what he aggressively titles a civilization operating system.
It is a remarkable escalation of scope, truly. Let's examine tiers 1 and 2 first, which represent the immediate and medium-term product builds.
Okay.
These tiers are heavily focused on supercharging the tools of creation and completely restructuring the platform's overall information architecture. For example, to bridge the huge gap between short-form posts and deep, serious journalism, he proposes a feature called Articles for Everyone.
Which is essentially a medium killer built directly into the timeline. It would grant every single user access to a native rich text publishing suite.
Right, supporting long-form essays, embedded citations, complex formatting, and all of it tied directly into the platform's monetization engine.
And then to capture the massive video market, he suggests a native creator video editing light suite, which would eliminate the need for third-party software like Premiere or CapCut.
You would just upload a raw video right from your phone, and the native AI auto-trims the silence, generates dynamic, stylish captions, and literally, with a single click, identifies the most engaging 30 seconds to clip as a promotional trailer.
It just removes all the friction of creation. They also propose a highly specific tool for journalists in Tier 1 called the Multi-Tweet Embed Bundle,
which solves a very real headache. Currently, if a news outlet wants to embed the timeline of a fast-breaking event, it's this chaotic, messy list of individual links.
Right, you have to embed like 10 different posts separately.
This tool would allow a journalist to select 20 different posts across various accounts, click Bundle, and generate a single cohesive chronological block of context that can be embedded cleanly on an external news site.
These are highly, highly practical enhancements. But the ambition of the roadmap shifts gears significantly when we look at his proposals for voice and translation.
This is where it gets genuinely futuristic. Scoble proposes audio tweets. But this isn't the standard voice memo feature we've had for years.
No, it's way beyond that.
Yeah.
You speak into your device in your native language,
Yeah.
say Japanese. The platform's AI instantly transcribes the audio with perfect accuracy. But here is the massive, massive technological leap. It automatically translates that audio to the native language of the person listening to it on the other end.
And Scoble specifies that the AI would actually clone and preserve the original speaker's vocal cadence and emotional tone in the translated audio.
Which is just mind-blowing if we extrapolate the implications of that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it effectively destroys the language barrier on the internet.
It completely dismantles it. Currently, the global internet is not truly global. It is a series of isolated language-based silos. The Anglosphere rarely interacts directly with the localized internets of Brazil, Japan, or the Middle East, unless a traditional media institution acts as an intermediary translator.
But with real-time tone-preserving, universal translation, applied to text, to audio posts, and even to LiveSpace's audio rooms, the friction of language just evaporates.
Imagine a scenario where a localized agricultural protest breaks out in rural India. Under this system, a public policy researcher sitting in a quiet office in the Netherlands can enter a live audio room and listen to the farmers explain their grievances in real time.
Hearing the actual emotion in their voices.
Exactly, perfectly translated into Dutch. And the researcher can speak back to them in Dutch, and the farmers hear it instantly in Hindi.
It creates the first truly borderless planetary town square. I mean, the geopolitical implications are just profound.
It democratizes the flow of raw human information. It completely bypasses state media filters and forces a level of cross-cultural exposure that is fundamentally unprecedented in human history.
It's essentially a machine designed to scale human empathy by removing the mechanical friction of misunderstanding.
That is an incredibly optimistic view of the technology.
I know, I'm hoping it plays out exactly like that. But to manage that absolute fire hose of global multilingual information, the roadmap proposes some radical changes to how we organize data. And the information architecture features absolutely blew my mind. Specifically, something Scoble calls time travel mode.
Ah, yes, time travel mode. This concept directly attacks the ephemeral nature of social media itself. Historically, the timeline is a river that just constantly washes away the past. You can't ever step in the same river twice.
Right. But Scoble proposes a dedicated calendar interface.
You open the calendar, click on a specific date, say March 14th, 2020, and the platform reloads your entire timeline exactly as it existed on that specific day.
You see the breaking news, the trending topics, the specific fears, and the jokes of the culture just unfolding in the exact chronological order they did years ago.
It stops treating data as disposable content and starts treating it as a permanent, searchable historical archive. Imagine the value to historians 50 years from now, being able to virtually live through the digital consciousness of a major global event day by day.
It elevates the platform from just being an aggregator to the definitive digital historiography of the 21st century.
Yeah.
And he applies a very similar architectural shift to how we view individual users with a feature called the Deep Timeline Explorer.
Which solves a very specific, very modern problem. If you discover a brilliant economist on X today and you really want to know their overarching worldview currently, you have to scroll endlessly through thousands of out-of-context replies, retweets, and fragmented thoughts.
Yeah, it's exhausting. But the Deep Timeline Explorer replaces all that scrolling with an AI-generated knowledge view.
You click a single button, and the AI synthesizes their entire digital footprint into a structured map of their brain. It summarizes their core recurring themes, outlines their strongest arguments, and maps how their opinions on specific topics like artificial intelligence or monetary policy have evolved over, say, a 5-year period.
It turns a messy social media profile into a curated intellectual library.
It does. And to protect that library from the inherent toxicity of the internet, Scoble proposes integrating major discourse improvements, like a signal versus noise toggle that instantly filters out repetitive outrage bait, leaving only heavily researched threads.
But the crown jewel of this section is definitely debate mode.
Debate mode attempts to engineer rational discourse into a platform that has historically always optimized for tribal conflict.
Right. So if two users engage in debate mode, the UI structurally enforces logical constraints.
It requires distinct claims, clear counterclaims, and community-reviewed evidence links. The integrated AI actively monitors the exchange, flagging logical fallacies or unsourced assertions in real time.
It literally forces users out of the paradigm of just performative dunking and into a rigid structure of rigorous tier review.
So tiers 1 and 2 fundamentally upgrade X into the ultimate creator tool and a highly organized archive of human thought. But it is still at its core just a communications app.
Right.
Tier 3 is where Scoble's manifesto truly crosses the Rubicon. The moonshots, the civilization level.
This is where X ceases to be a social network entirely and attempts to become the foundational infrastructure for human society.
The ambition in Tier 3 is honestly staggering because it expands across 4 distinct societal layers. Let's begin with the financial layer. Scoble envisions the full deployment of XPay, transitioning the app into a global, zero-fee, peer-to-peer monetary network.
It's basically the WeChat model, but scaled globally. Sending money becomes exactly as frictionless as sending a direct message, But the critical application he highlights here is borderless remittances.
Because currently the global remittance market is incredibly heavily extractive. A migrant worker in the United States sending money back to their family in Nepal often loses massive percentages to intermediary banking fees and terrible exchange rates.
Right. Scoble proposes a system where that worker can send $10 directly through the X app instantly with absolutely zero middleman extraction.
Moving from the financial layer, he outlines the knowledge layer. He proposes Grokopedia.
Grokopedia, right, which is an AI-powered living alternative to Wikipedia, where querying information isn't just reading a static text page, but engaging in a dynamic real-time conversation with the sum total of human knowledge.
And he pairs this with X-tutors utilizing the AI to provide highly personalized, infinitely patient education in the user's native language.
And then he introduces the infrastructure layer. This includes disaster mode.
Which is fascinating. In the event of a catastrophic earthquake or severe flooding, the app automatically shifts its entire UI. It suppresses all standard social content and routes citizens to verified shelters, hospitals, and supply drops using secure government channels.
Effectively turning the massive user base into a distributed real-time crisis response network.
And to guarantee access to that network regardless of local conditions, he proposes the integration of the Starlink X-Phone.
A rugged, solar-charged, voice-first hardware device distributed specifically to the billions of underserved populations across the globe, ensuring they remain connected to this operating system even if their local cellular infrastructure completely collapses.
And finally, the innovation layer, a feature called Idea to Startup Mode. A user types a raw business concept into the app. The AI immediately runs market research, generates a pitch deck, codes a landing page, builds a waitlist, and automatically serves the entire package into a dedicated feed for venture capitalists.
Okay, wait, I have to stop here. I just have to.
Right.
Because the technical progression makes logical sense, sure, but the societal implications of this are genuinely alarming. I want to push back aggressively on this entire Tier 3 vision.
Okay, walk through the structural concern here.
We are talking about one single privately owned corporate entity running a global currency, replacing Wikipedia as the sole arbiter of truth, acting as the primary educator for children managing international disaster response, and serving as the foundational telecommunications hardware for the developing world.
Right.
At what point does a tech company effectively become a sovereign nation? Or worse, an entirely unaccountable global monopoly?
It is arguably the defining regulatory question of our era. The concentration of power is absolute.
I mean, if XPay becomes the primary financial rail for the developing world, a single algorithmic tweak or a random server outage freezes the economy of entire countries. If time travel mode controls the historical archive, whoever controls Grok controls the past.
That's a valid fear.
If you consolidate money, news, education, and emergency alerts under one single CEO, you aren't building a utopia of frictionless connection. You are building the ultimate digital panopticon. It basically replaces traditional colonialism with digital colonialism.
That is the dystopian hazard, without question. And it is a massive single point of failure for human infrastructure. However, we really must ensure we aren't analyzing this solely from a position of Western infrastructural privilege.
What do you mean by that?
Well, to understand why these Tier 3 moonshots have so much actual momentum, we have to look at the massive void they are attempting to fill.
You're talking about the global unbanked and the disconnected.
Exactly. If you live in London or Tokyo, you have perfectly stable banking, heavily regulated internet service providers, and a functioning municipal emergency response system. To you, XPay and disaster mode look like extremely dangerous corporate overreach.
Because I don't strictly need them.
Right. But consider the reality for billions of people operating completely outside those safety nets. For the migrant worker being bled dry by remittance fees, a zero-cost, borderless financial rail isn't digital colonialism. It is immediate, profound economic liberation.
Ah, I see. That is the supreme tension of Silicon Valley ambition, isn't it? The exact same tool is viewed as a terrifying monopoly in the first world and an absolute lifeline in the developing world.
For a child in an isolated village without access to a formal school system, an AI-powered X-tutor running on a solar-charged satellite phone isn't some dystopian replacement for a human teacher. It is the first and only access they have to customized world-class education.
Right, they wouldn't have a teacher otherwise.
Exactly. The vision Scoble synthesized from those 40,000 accounts isn't just about dominating a market. It is about recognizing that the internet itself is fundamentally evolving from a decentralized web of static pages into a unified, conversational, multilingual, and monetizable operating system.
It is a breathtaking, terrifying, and genuinely awe-inspiring scope. And it brings us all the way back down from the moonshots right back to the glass and metal device sitting in your hand right now.
We really have covered incredible ground today.
We have journeyed from the raw, sub-second mechanics of the Phoenix algorithm, which reshaped the economic reality of millions of creators in an instant,
Through the profound philosophical friction of trying to maintain a global town square while simultaneously building a walled creator economy.
all the way to a sci-fi blueprint for a planetary operating system capable of translating global thought and routing international crisis response. But what anchors all of this, what truly ties the algorithm to the moonshots, is the realization of your own participation in the machine.
Every single time you scroll.
Yes. Every time you scroll, every time your thumb pauses on an image for 3 seconds, every time you tap reply, you are not just passively consuming content, you are feeding the engine.
You are continuously updating your dynamic embedding. You are providing the exact micro-adjustments to your own living vector. You are actively, day by day, training a multi-billion parameter transformer model on the precise mechanics of your own human consciousness and desire.
Which leaves us with a final lingering thought to explore on your own. If an AI system like Phoenix is processing 5 billion decisions every single day, if it is calculating a 19-branch probability tree of your physical actions before you even see a post, and dynamically shifting the coordinates of your digital identity in real time.
At what exact threshold does the machine stop predicting what you want and begin actually programming what you care about?
Are we training the algorithm to serve us, or is the algorithm training us to serve the network? That is the definitive question we will be answering for the next decade. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us.